Legend has it there is one place in Hikarizaka High where one must never go. It is known as the library, and no, you shouldn't avoid it just because there are books there, for something far worse lurks in the shadows. While she appears to be little more than your average high school girl, you would be wise not to underestimate her. Her destructive output is catastrophic, and her weapon is the violin. Any human within a 3-mile radius of this device's soundwave blast must escape within half a second, because if they don't, they will succumb to a severe medical condition known as death. And if you don't believe me, I have a recording here of this monster in action. Don't worry, the audio has been adjusted to make it relatively safe for human ears. Now you fully comprehend the dangers of dealing with the... wait a second. YouTube has, like, rules against showing carnage like this on screen, right? That's, sorry about that, guys. I was just kidding about all that. Kotomi Ichinose is a kind and innocent girl who would never commit such atrocities. And now on to our regularly scheduled super wholesome program that does not and will not contain any of the following: murder. Enjoy the video. Welcome back to Clannad is Perfect for Me. Today we're diving into our first character route, and one of the main 5 at that. See, Clannad may have 13 routes in its first half, but Nagisa, Kotomi, Kyou, Tomoyo, and Fuko's are the main attractions. They're the ones that you see on the cover of every box, and it's clear that more thought and care was put into their stories compared to the others. In short, you're in for a treat today. And seeing as how this route has very little connection to the others while still being a great introduction to several of our main characters, it only made sense to do this one next. On April 15th or 16th if you missed it the first time, Tomoya makes his way to the library in order to get some shut-eye during class. Little does he know, Kotomi Ichinose is also playing hooky here, and she catches his eye by pulling out a pair of scissors and committing unspeakable acts to this book. Are you fucking kidding? I just said murder was off the table. Thankfully, Tomoya stops her, and the awkward yet engaging conversation that ensues plunges us headfirst into one of my favorite things about this route. You might remember my first Clannad video where I used Kotomi's anime arc as an example for Clannad's superb use of foreshadowing. Well, this route is still the king in that regard, and since the visual novel has 100 times more dialogue than the anime, we get a metric ton of hints dropped at our feet. For example, here are a handful of things we see during Kotomi and Tomoya's first few interactions. When Tomoya catches her cutting up the book, he asks her if her parents ever taught her how to take care of public property. Kotomi seems very relaxed and easygoing around Tomoya. She doesn't seem to understand what's embarrassing about feeding him during their first interaction together, and she tries to get him to sit with her shoulder to shoulder. This is all coming from a girl who's absolutely terrified of meeting new people. On top of that, she gets confused when Tomoya asks her for her name. Tomoya himself mentions that something seems familiar about her. They also set up a callback by having her tell Tomoya she'll see him tomorrow. I'm sure everyone watching who knows this story is banging their heads against a wall right now, wondering how they never noticed any of this stuff. To be fair though, Tomoya does a pretty good job covering the game's tracks. See, he's the type who likes to stay out of other people's business, and he tends to make incorrect assumptions about things due to his low self-esteem. Depressing stuff, I know, but it sure made life easier on the writers. He never considers the possibility that Kotomi is specifically interested in interacting with him, even when he describes his absurd interactions with her to Sunohara. Anyway, the library you obviously didn't know about is down the hallway. A mysterious cute girl is there by herself reading really complicated books. If you talk to her, she'll give you a snippet of a page as a gift. She feeds you lunch sometimes too. I realize that saying it out loud makes it sound really fake. Despite making that realization, he sends Sunohara in anyways because why would he expect him to be treated differently than he was? And about keeping out of other people's business, there's a scene where one of the lunch ladies straight up says Kotomi's parents were great scientists, and he doesn't think twice about it. The best part is, these reactions Tomoya has work twofold. Not only is every little hint being slowly swept under the rug before it becomes too obvious, we're getting some great characterization for our main main protagonists too. This isn't where this whole foreshadowing thing ends either, but you might find that this next piece of the puzzle has an entirely different gatekeeper. Now, if you all will, please turn your textbooks to page 576 and read the assigned passage. Oh wait, sorry, that's just my Patreon page. Haha, how did that get in there? No, turn to page 577. The Dandelion Girl is a 1961 short story by Robert F. Young that follows Mark Randolph, a 44-year-old man taking a 2-week vacation in a cabin by a lake. He's all by himself since his wife got called into jury duty and eventually the boredom got to him. He makes his way through the forest searching for something to pass the time, eventually finding himself on a hill staring at Julie Danvers, a 21-year-old who claims to be from 240 years in the future. Their conversations begin with playful intrigue as Mark admires her youthful outlook and outlandish storytelling, but as the days go by, he finds that his interest evolves into love. Good going, dipshit. The wife leaves for 2 weeks and you go and find yourself somebody half your age. He tries to shake off these feelings, however, every time they part, he always finds himself asking if she'll be back tomorrow. On the final day they meet on the hill, she mentions that her father passed away and she feels as though she has nothing to live for. Mark comforts her and asks if she'll come back tomorrow as always, but she says she only has one more use of her time machine left. She never returns, and Mark's wife appears a little more dejected and fearful than usual upon returning home. One day she leaves to go play bingo, giving Mark time to sift through the attic. It's there where he finds one of Julie's dresses, weaved with materials he doesn't even recognize. It's here where he learns that she was telling the truth about being from the future, and that she used that final time travel to meet him when he was 21 and become his wife. It's a nice little story whose strength lies in the mystique and wonder it instills in the reader. Kotomi seems to agree because several times throughout her route we see her quoting Julie's most famous line. You probably don't get where I'm going with this yet, but trust me, by the end of this video you're going to be writing a strongly worded letter to the CEO of plagiarism. That sentence was brought to you by somebody who doesn't know where you go to complain about plagiarism. I find that Kotomi's character shares a lot of the same strengths as Julie's. She's a very strange and mysterious person, and the things she says serve to pique your curiosity further. But seeing as how Clannad has a much higher word count than Daffodil Female here, Kotomi is going to need a lot more than intrigue to keep us hooked. Luckily for us, her likable personality and excellent chemistry with the other characters is more than enough to drive interest. Here's a perfect example of what this genius space case has to offer you. Tomoya decides he'll read a book one day and asks Kotomi for a recommendation. She offers him books from 2 languages he doesn't speak and one about how the human brain has special functions that can't be replicated by computers. How about something more normal, like a best-selling novel? She tilts her head to the side and returns to her books, pulling out a rather depressing-looking one coated in all black. She tells him it's not really a novel, but it's a bestseller in many countries. Oh great, that sounds really... It's the fucking Old Testament. I'm a simple man. I see funny, I'm interested. And as usual, Tomoya's winning personality shines through in all the little observations he makes while interacting with this strange girl. But best of all, these two are far from alone. A big part of the first half of this route is devoted to helping Kotomi find more friends, as she isn't making any just sitting in the library and reading all day. Let's think about this. Who does Tomoya know at the beginning of each route? Well, there's a certain pair of purple-haired twins who come to mind, as well as this one girl who he found standing still at the foot of the hill to school the other day. He introduces Kotomi to them one by one, starting with Nagisa. As you might have guessed, her people skills are as awkward and hilarious as they come.
Hey master, I am math scientist. It's so cool. Son of a bitch.
Surprisingly though, these two hit it off immediately. Nagisa has the uncanny ability of matching the pace of whoever she's conversing with, leading to these overwhelmingly adorable interactions. If Kotomi introduces herself in some strange way, Nagisa will introduce herself back exactly like she did. If partway through their conversation Kotomi starts a random word game, Nagisa will happily follow along. And while Tomoya did the same thing, he would stop it early on with some kind of retort retort, while these two could very well go on forever. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Kyou is thoroughly unamused by her introduction. Whether it's out of genuine principle or just wanting to be mean to Tomoya, probably a little of both, she argues that friends are something that you make, not something others give you, which is why 3 days later she approaches Kotomi herself and befriends her. Ryo gets into her own tomfoolery by having Kotomi participate in her fortune-telling hobby. She tells Kotomi she isn't going to make any friends tomorrow, which is about as uncalled for as it gets. The thing is, she doesn't even own tarot cards, so she uses playing cards to read fortunes instead. These things have no meaning. You could have just said she's going to make a bunch of friends and leave it at that, but no. I wasn't lying last video when I said this girl is crafty. She's a schemer through and through.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
Yes you fucking do. Anyways, the 5 of them all meet up in the drama club room to hang out, and thus one of the greatest group dynamics I've ever witnessed is born. I'm just gonna gush for a minute because these 5 are so much fun. I love these characters so much. They perfectly capture that exhausting yet endlessly warm and rewarding feeling of having a lively group of friends. The kind that you hang out with for so many hours that before you know it, the day is over and you can't wait to do the same thing tomorrow. No cares in the world, no talks about the future, just having a good time in the present moment and staying like that for as long as possible. They've got their own inside jokes, like Nagisa being branded as the evil drama club president whose spite and malice knows no bounds. Kotomi Ichinose Mark I is an all-purpose appliance robot that everybody should have in their homes. And Kyou is known far and wide for her favorite hobby, bullying the defenseless. Okay, I know I've been kind of mean to her throughout both this video and the last one, but don't get the wrong impression, because during this part of the route, Kyou steals the show. Her extroverted personality is the driving force behind everything this friend group does together, and her dynamic with everyone else is undoubtedly the strongest out of all of them. She serves as the much-needed straight man to this group's unusually high number of timid and clumsy girls. If she wasn't here to help mediate when these 3 get up to their usual antics, I'm pretty sure Tomoya would have gone insane. The cherry on top is Nagisa and Kotomi actually adapting to Kyou and Tomoya's verbal abuse over time and learning to retort themselves. Speaking of which, giving Tomoya a like-minded person to talk to while Nagisa, Kotomi, and Ryo are off in La La Land was a really good move. She has this great conversation with him where she mentions that Ryo and Kotomi both have feelings for him. Tomoya is pretty indifferent about it, which is to be expected, but the intrigue comes from why Kyou is even telling him this. It seems innocent enough, but the way she says it makes it feel as though this is anything but someone simply informing their friend about an observation they've made. Couple that with their ridiculously stellar chemistry and I soon found myself fighting the urge to drop Kotomi's route then and there to migrate over to Kyou's. All in due time though. Anyways, I could go over the many hilarious jokes that come from these 5, but we really should be getting back to the plot of this route soon. I'll just wrap this part up by mentioning that when they all first start hanging out, there's a day when Nagisa enters the drama club room while everyone's inside and then immediately leaves. For context, she's been sitting in here after school by herself for days because nobody wanted to join the club. A short while later, she comes back into the room and says I saw a bunch of people having fun, so I thought I was in the wrong room. So far, the story has been just this, fun moments with friends, while in the background you can see every little bit of foreshadowing being meticulously stacked up into this glorious structure. You've got everything I've already talked about, plus this strange man who Kotomi avoids and refers to as the bad guy. There's the fact that Kotomi and Tomoya start dating after Kotomi asks him out. There was the whole violin thing where Kotomi's playing is so bad that it just straight up makes it so people fall asleep, but forever. And finally, Tomoya's been having a lot of strange dreams lately. Most are related to a fire that he can't put out, and then there's this one which has the best line in the visual novel. All of these things feel like random events, like they don't go together whatsoever, so I wouldn't even blame you for missing the setup. But when Clannad decides to topple all the pieces over, you feel it just as much as you hear it. Out of the dozens of hours of footage I have recorded of this game, my audio capture only peaked once right here, and the reason it did was because of Kotomi's presumed overreaction to a grim misunderstanding. See, Nagisa heard that a bus got into an accident in town and knew that Ryo was currently riding one to school. She assumed she must have been the one on the bus that crashed and rushed to tell everyone. Ryo shows up shortly afterwards and informs them that she's all good, and so are all the people who were in the crash, but that doesn't stop Kotomi from going into hysterics. They take her to the nurse and she quickly stops coming to school afterwards. The news hits the group pretty hard, and Tomoya's initial reaction is so incredibly sad yet so beautifully indicative of who he is as a person at this point. Earlier I mentioned Tomoya's negative viewpoint of himself, how he's unable to see how much the time he spends with others means to them. When Kotomi works for hours to make a lunchbox specifically to share with him, the only thought he has is I'm such an ass for eating half her food. He constantly put up walls while interacting with her, insisting to himself that they live in completely different worlds, that there's no way they'd have anything in common. This is far from the last time he does this, and for those of you who know Kotomi's route well, you might not believe me when I say this isn't even the most ironic example of it. Kotomi's personality doesn't help his situation much either. There's this tinge of guilt that comes from hanging out with somebody who only wants to do what you want to do, because no matter what they say, it always seems like they're straining themselves for your sake. When Tomoya oversleeps the day of his first date with Kotomi, he rushes over to their meeting spot and she tells him with a smile that she's only been waiting for an hour and 10 minutes. No frustration, no concern. What the hell is he supposed to make of that? But regardless, while Tomoya may have a knack for losing his cool in the moment, he always tends to come to the right conclusion after thinking things through. Who cares that he thinks he doesn't know enough about her? The fact of the matter is he cares about her, so let's go fix this. Hey, super cool homeroom teacher who I wish the game gave a name to. Give me her address so I can go find her. After cleverly checking to see if Tomoya has Kotomi's best interests at heart through casual conversation, the teacher lets us in on some important information. 1. Kotomi used to be bullied quite frequently as a kid due to the widely televised success of her parents, giving context to her fear of bullies, which has been prevalent up until now. 2. There have been talks about Kotomi studying abroad in America, and she just gave them the go-ahead this morning, as if to confirm that she plans on running away from this. And finally, Tomoya is given her address on a small slip of paper. The teacher asks him if he's dating Kotomi, a question that he dodges twice in a row, causing her to change it to this: do you think that you being around Kotomi is having an influence on her? Tomoya thinks to himself that this is an even harder question to answer, but ultimately he says yes, stepping past his self-destructive thoughts and acknowledging the fact that he means something to her. It's a positive change for sure, but the teacher's comments afterwards bring light to the trade-off. The burden of saving her has now been placed firmly on his shoulders. If I let her go overseas, I'll never see Kotomi again. Tomoya makes his way to her house, a place far too large for just one person to stay in, and as he reaches for the front gate, he stops himself. This wasn't the way he used to get in. He makes his way to the back of the property and goes through a hidden entryway, landing him in an overgrown and hopelessly unkempt garden. This isn't at all how this place is supposed to be. He makes his way through the house and into the study, where he sees Kotomi lying on the floor, surrounded by scraps of paper. We learn that Kotomi's parents passed away several years ago in a plane crash, and I would just like the court to know that it was a freak accident, not murder, so we're still clear on that front. Anyways, a lot of the puzzle pieces the first part of this route laid at our feet are now falling into place, and in order to fill in a few more, how about a flashback from Kotomi's perspective? Her parents are two of the greatest minds of the era, and they're currently researching a newly discovered hidden world of sorts, where true happiness manifests itself into balls of light. That sounds pretty interesting. Maybe we should keep it in mind for later, but being big shot scientists leads to busy schedules, and the two end up needing to take a flight overseas to attend to quote-unquote sudden business during Kotomi's birthday. Kotomi is obviously not okay with this. She was looking forward to her birthday for weeks. Mom was going to make a ton of great food. Dad was going to get her a giant teddy bear as a gift. And who knows, maybe that guy Tomoya who she made friends with recently will come too. She tells her parents that she hates them over and over again as they head out the door, despite their endless apologies. They leave her with these parting words: be a good girl and wait for us. Why they didn't just hire a babysitter is beyond me, but I guess they just trust her enough to let her be by herself. Admittedly, there are 3 or 4 instances in this part of the story where you can nitpick the actions of some characters, but ultimately I feel these complaints are trivial in the face of this route's phenomenal storytelling. Of course, seeing as how her parents are getting on a plane, you probably know what happens from here. And okay, this is gonna sound really bad, but I think the prolonged focus on the despair that Kotomi feels afterwards is fantastic. Her parents' colleagues, including that man who we've seen a couple of times now, come to tell her the news, and she locks them out of the house. Their minds understandably appear to draw a blank on how to handle this situation, so they decide to hang back and just watch over her for now. Kotomi finds herself all alone in her home. The phone rings constantly, and whenever she picks it up, it's a member of the press trying to get an interview. Eventually, she cuts the phone line to make it stop. She becomes hyper aware of her environment. Noises such as the static from the TV that she never paid any mind to previously now make her jump, a telltale sign that her mind is currently being ruled by fear. She remembers her parents mentioning once that God is watching over her, so she looks up into the sky and prays, saying that she thinks the plane crashed because she was a bad girl who said she hated her parents, and that if they came back home, she'll be a good girl from now on. She questions what she'll do once the meals her mom left in the fridge for her run out, leading to a line that made my heart sink even though I was reading it for the second time. Tomoya never showed up to her birthday despite receiving an invitation. Little did Kotomi know he didn't come because he was ashamed that he couldn't convince any of his friends at school to come too. Same old Tomoya. I doubt he even considered that just him showing up would have been more than enough. And finally, Kotomi makes her way into the room she's sitting in today and burns what she thinks is the last surviving copy of her parents' groundbreaking research paper. Of course, after the fire started, the men moved in and put it out. It's all so much. Tomoya knew her in the past, but forgot all about it, possibly out of shame. Kotomi's lived her entire life since then studying so that she can understand her parents' work, and she cuts their names out of every book she could get her hands on as a way to atone for what she did to them. And this is the problem that he chose to solve. What can he do? What can he even say? All he musters is a request for her to come to school tomorrow. She refuses, but he insists once again before leaving. The next day, he finds himself once again at Kotomi's doorstep after she doesn't show up to school. Nagisa is also here after getting her address from that same teacher from before, and she lets it slip that the rest of the group is planning on doing something for her birthday in 3 days. She also reinforces the responsibility Tomoya has to Kotomi by telling him that he's the only one who can fix this. Inspired by her words, he decides to do something for Kotomi on his own. And what could be more meaningful than restoring the place where they played so often as kids to its former glory? Their own little hill in the forest clearing, if you will. I think this is my favorite part of this route. The next 3 days are spent mowing, trimming, picking, planting, and painting until Kotomi's yard looks exactly like he remembered it. They take you through the entire process, from screwing up initially to researching the proper methods to working himself to the bone day and night to get everything done on time. It really makes you appreciate the amount of effort that's going into this gift for her, and it doubles as a beautiful indicator of how much Tomoya has grown since this route started. See, he's been subtly changing ever since he got in touch with Kotomi again. We first see it when he agrees to Kyo's request to go buy drinks for everybody while they're hanging out, much to her surprise. We see it again when he asks Kotomi if she'll read to him, a request that she made to him several days earlier, which he fervently denied. And now here he is, the aloof and apathetic delinquent, dipping into the savings he was going to use to leave his father's home and cutting class much more than usual, because to him, there's something much more important that he needs to focus on. Of course, his mind wavers from time to time, and we're actually given the option to give up twice while he's doing this. The first one comes when he finds out that the violin the girls were going to give to her as a birthday gift was severely damaged by a reckless biker. The second comes when he continues to work on the yard into the night. After choosing to press forward the second time, we see a strange orb of light descend upon the garden, and it disappears as quickly as it appeared. At this point in the overall story of Clannad, I doubt this means much to you, so let's just take it as a sign that we're on the right path and keep going. After his work is complete, he gazes upon this wonderful little yard and takes a seat at the freshly painted table in the middle. He remembers the book that Kotomi gave him a while back, containing a story that she loved very much as a kid. You might recall its name, which wait. He fell asleep. I know that they did this so that he could have a dream sequence that ends with Kotomi coming out of her house once again, but I can't help but adore the fact that this dude just straight up fell asleep reading an 11-page story. Anyways, Tomoya recalls that she and him memorized the first conversation the two main characters in that story had, and he decides that these should be the first words he says to her as she stands in the doorway to the garden. "I suppose you traveled here by time machine." These are the words of a man who met the person he's speaking to in the past but was unaware of this fact. The girl he's talking to is someone who is devastated by the loss of her only family, and she ended up falling for the man only to meet him again while he's at a much different age and do it all over again. I think this is one of the best examples of taking inspiration from another work and making it your own, and we see Clannad's spin on it clear as day in this exact scene. Just when Tomoya thinks he has her, Kotomi puts her head in her hands and laments that doing this won't bring anything back. What she did can't be undone, and the memories she made with Tomoya as kids can never be relived. After she mentions that she should have died alongside her parents, Tomoya runs up and hugs her, begging her to never say that again. She tells him she's scared. Scared because no matter how much you care about somebody, one day they're going to go away. It's a sentiment that anyone who's experienced the opening minutes of this story is all too familiar with. Fun things, happy things, they'll all eventually change. But even so, can you still love this place? Tomoya reassures her that no matter what happens, he'll never truly leave her. And then they make me remember that this is one of those special stories where romance actually has a purpose. It deepens the route's connection to its inspiration, and it makes the conflict so much more emotionally meaningful than if they were just friends. While I love the anime to death, its inability to let Tomoya get too close to anyone but Nagisa hurts its adaptation of this route in my eyes. Anyways, we've still got some business to attend to before we ride off into the sunset for today. The girls give Kotomi a voucher for her violin because it hasn't been repaired yet, and Nagisa drew Dango characters from this big Dango family children's franchise that she's super into all over it. As they're about to go to class, a teacher tells Kotomi that the man who, like that one teacher, unfortunately does not have a name, would like to talk to her. Tomoya says he's not a bad guy at all since he's talked to him quite a bit already, and Kyou suggests that they go hear him out together. When they arrive, the man directs Kotomi's attention to a briefcase sitting on a table. It's pretty beat up, but it looks as though it's been repaired quite a few times, as if it's been passed through the hands of several people. Upon opening it, she finds a teddy bear and a letter. The letter's envelope asks whoever finds this briefcase to please take it to the writer's daughter, and while the signature is cut off, Kotomi can tell that this came from her parents. The man explains that they believe the suitcase was thrown out the window as the plane crashed, and it washed up on shore after a very long time. Whoever found it and opened it up became compelled to fulfill the letter's wish. Nobody knows how many people it was passed on to. Nobody knows how many countries it traveled through to get here. But here's something we do know. As the man explains, that envelope Kotomi burned when she was little did not contain a copy of her parents' paper. It was actually a catalog for teddy bears. So I'm glad it got burned. Think of all the things we learned for the people who are still alive. I'm going to hell. And in the spirit of replacing research for stuffed animals, the man explains that Kotomi's parents, in their final moments, must have taken the actual research paper out of their suitcase in order to make room for their daughter's birthday present, hoping that maybe, eventually, it will reach her. The letter, beginning in her father's handwriting, explains that the world is beautiful and that no matter what happens, it's always important to keep your head up, mirroring the words Tomoya spoke to her back at her house. After picking up the teddy bear, Kotomi breaks down and tells her mother and father welcome home as this wonderful song that only plays during this route begins. There's this collage of the message on the back of the envelope translated into several different languages, showing us just how many people made an effort to fulfill the request of these loving parents, which is a callback to something that Kyou said an hour or so ago. I think that's really cool, and what's this weird liquid shit coming out of my eyes? In the last video, I mentioned mentioned that Clannad puts a heavy emphasis on the importance of family, and I gotta say, after experiencing this route again, I can understand why clear as day, and it's wrapped up together perfectly by the last thing we see before the credits roll. A well-maintained backyard which you can tell somebody has cared a great deal for. There's a table with 2 chairs in the middle of it. In one chair you'll find a precious gift from Kotomi's family, and in the other you'll find exactly the same. Things may change, family may be forced apart, but even so, nothing will stop this girl from looking ahead and enjoying her time with the people she holds dear in this spacious garden of hers. And before we get kicked back to the title screen, we see Tomoya's outstretched arm accepting a familiar looking ball of light into his hand. I don't know about you, but something tells me we'll be seeing more of these things in the future. Special thanks to Silent Secondary and the rest of my wonderful patrons.